Hello and welcome to Have You Heard, where we explore science in the news. Each episode, a group of us will discuss a piece of scientific news that has caught our attention and reveal the real story behind the dramatic headlines. For example,
have you heard that mosquito bites could be prevented by graphene?
Have you heard that you can make an invisibility cloak out of graphene?
have you heard that graphene is the medical miracle that could cure the blind?
In this episode, we're discussing graphene, and we are joined by...
Hello, my name is Clara. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Manchester, and I'm studying how to use graphene to make drinking water in a more environmentally sustainable way. My fun fact is that up until very recently, I spent about 4 hours a week belly dancing while doing my other engineering work.
Hi, I'm Luke, and I'm a researcher also at the University of Manchester. And my fun fact this time is that up until about 2 years ago, I thought that everyone tried to walk on the left of all paths.
And hi, I'm Katie. I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of Manchester. And my fun fact is that I thought Unilever was a graduate recruitment company for Unilevers.
It makes a lot of sense.
I was always really confused as to why they weren't always at graduate affairs and they were villainized and things. I was like, they're just helping graduates get jobs.
That's very
Disclaimer,
good.
this is not true.
I like that.
Nice. But yeah, I did genuinely, I didn't think it was a rule. I just thought that generally when you're walking about, you try and stick to the left.
Okay. No, I could, no, you know what? Life should be like that. No, life should be like that.
That's like how the stairs work on the tube, isn't it?
Right. I thought all of life was like that.
I mean, it's not. But...
I mean, it's not, but yeah, fine.
Like cars do. And I even, like, when I'd go to Europe, I'd make a conscious effort to do it the opposite way around and walk on the right. I must have just done this and never bothered to question it or mention it to anyone because I just brought it up casually and some friends were like, yeah, no, that's not a thing. Like, no one does that. And I'd even get, not annoyed, but like slightly frustrated when I'm walking along and people aren't keeping to the left. Mm-hmm. And I just assumed it was how society functioned. And I don't even know where I picked this up from.
To be fair, I met this lovely girl from South Africa and we were going motorbiking like around Indonesia, and I was like, okay, so Indonesia they drive on the left, so that's okay for me because I'm from the UK. And I asked her, like, I'm sorry, I'm ignorant, I don't know which side of the road do you drive on in South Africa? And she was like, we drive on both sides of the road. And I was like, no, like when you're going somewhere, which side? And she was like, I don't know we use both sides. There's like ongoing traffic and traffic coming back. We use left and right. And I was like, yeah, but she just didn't understand it. So I assumed that in South Africa it's just a free-for-all.
It's absolute chaos, presumably.
That sounds so stressful.
Much like our public footpaths.
Oh.
Absolute chaos. And what was yours, sorry, Clara?
Oh, my interesting fact. Yeah, I'm, you know, I'm used to be a bit of a belly dancer.
Oh, belly dancing, yes. I assume as an aside to your engineering, not simultaneously.
Yeah, no. Can't blend belly with work.
I heard it as simultaneously and I was like, I'm really interested in how this happened.
Oh, like in the lab.
You're standing around a lot. You gotta pass the time somehow. But yeah, so you form at Pint of Science.
Yes.
Years ago, yeah. It was very good. But yes, so we're talking about graphene. And we have elected you our graphene expert, Clara.
Nice.
So no pressure. We're going to be asking lots of questions that are probably quite basic. So first off, what is graphene?
Okay, so graphene is just carbon atoms. So it's just carbon that's bonded to other carbon atoms so that it forms a hexagonal sheet that looks like honeycomb or like chicken wire. And
okay, yeah.
Is it 2D?
Yes. So when we're talking about 2D, people kind of think we're talking, is it flat? But actually what we're describing is the different directions that electrons are confined in. So in graphene, it's 2D. The electrons are confined within the X and the Y, but they're free within Z.
Okay.
So I should mention. So I mean, graphene is carbon atoms bonded together. It's one atom layer thick. It's the thinnest material in the world. It's also one of the strongest materials that we know of. It's about 200 times stronger than steel.
Wow.
But it's also flexible. It's transparent. It conducts heat really well. So it's got these kind of magical properties which are so different from its bulk material, graphite.
It really is amazing. It's a substance that seems to be all and do all things, and that's just mind-boggling to me. So one of the things that when I read about graphene that confuses me is I know it's one atom thick, but then when they start applying it to materials and like technologies, and then they show a picture of like a sheet, and I'm like, well, that's not one atom thick because I can see it. I assume, is it just lots of layers of it together?
You can actually just about see it. For some reason, for some magical reason, if you put graphene on silicon, because of the gap is just about perfect, it kind of comes up as purple on an optical microscope. Maybe you can't see it with a naked eye, but you can see it on an optical microscope because it absorbs about 2.3% of light. So it is just enough for the eye.
That's cool. So you can see something that's one
atom
thick.
And
that's very cool.
I actually have some in my house. And I mean, maybe it's like 2 or 3 layers thick of graphene. And if you just get it in the right kind of light, you can just about see a shaded area.
How do you not lose that?
That's why she's saying somewhere in the house. She doesn't know where she put it. Where's my graphene? Oh no.
Get the optical microscope out. It looks kind of purple.
Kind of purple, exactly.
And I suppose like before this, coming from the University of Manchester, we are big on graphene. The University of Manchester definitely likes to make a point that we're very important with graphene. However, one of the main things I only really know about it is that you take some sellotape, you take your pencil, and then you just keep applying that tape and ripping it off and doing it again. And that way you end up with a very thin sheet of graphene.
Exactly. So what you've just described is the origin story of graphene. So graphene is just graphite, but one atom layer thick. So graphite is all these stacks on top of each other. And every time you use a pencil, you're leaving a mark because the force of you pressing down on the pencil is stripping away those bonds between the sheets. And then it's leaving these sheets scattered. And then that's what's your pencil mark. So 2 professors at the University of Manchester in 2004, so it was Andrei Geim and Kostya Novoselov, they grabbed a piece of graphite, a crystal, and they put it on a scotch tape, and then they put the scotch tape together and they peeled it apart, and they saw that there was a deposition of graphite on this side and a deposition of graphite on that side. And what they'd done is just halved the crystal. They'd split all of the layers in half. So they put it together and they peeled it again, and then they had a quarter. They did it again, they did it again, they did it again. Not actually that many times. You have to peel back, peel back, peel back until you physically cannot split this material in half anymore because there's no more sheets, there's no more van der Waals. You have one single layer, and that's graphene. And they did that in the lab, or actually they were just messing around on a Friday afternoon, I think, and that's, the prize winners.
I like the combination of like
stories.
like low tech, like sellotape or non-branded equivalent.
Sellotape, post-it notes, Sharpies, basically scientific mistakes that go global. Yeah, with post-it notes, it was they were trying to make glue that would work underwater, I think. And they didn't succeed in that, but they did succeed in post-it notes, which is a glue that will stick again and again and again and again to a whole series of materials.
I enjoy the irony because post-it notes are very ineffective underwater.
They are very ineffective.
Just turn to mush. But yes, so the whole thing is about, so it's carbon atoms, and you mentioned silicon atoms, which have a similar property, but the carbon atoms can arrange themselves in loads of different ways. They like to make different bonds. So it's the reason that, so graphite, the stuff you have in pencils, and diamonds are the same atom arranged in different ways. And so the graphene, I'm going to make that mistake a lot. Pick me up on it.
Me too.
So that the graphene is single layers, thin layers of these hexagon shaped arrangements.
That's a really interesting point that you made there, Luke, when you referred to silicon. Is it just carbon that we can get these one layer sheets, or can we do this
That
with
is
other?
a very good question. We can do this with so many other elements. I remember what attracted me to doing the PhD was I saw a talk. I can't even remember the person who gave the talk. I saw a talk by someone who was saying they were basically reinventing the periodic table, but for 2D elements, and for getting basically just one atom layer thick of all different types of elements: molybdenum disulfide, tungsten disulfide, HBN, so hexagonal boron nitride. They found that once Andre and Kostya proved that it was possible to have a material at one atom layer thick that was, stable at room temperature, then people thought, oh my God, should we try the same technique? Should we try this with loads of other materials? And they found that loads of these were stable, and loads of these suddenly had these kind of magical properties at one atom layer thick. So they're inventing a new periodic table where they're saying, okay, this is carbon normally, this is carbon when it's graphene, and then redefining how we see materials.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Very cool.
It's so revolutionary as well.
So is that nanomaterials? Is that the
overarching
kind of field that you're talking? Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't know about that. That's actually blown my mind. I'm just going to sit here for a bit.
It's especially cool because your typical, when you imagine carbon, or at least I do, is you're talking like coal, like black kind of stuff. And to know that you can get a very strong sheet of that's single layer, that's transparent, that you can see through, is very cool.
That's the thing. I mean, if you want to break graphene, you have to break that carbon-carbon covalent bond, which is incredibly strong. And as you said, it's the bonds that hold together diamond, which is one of the strongest materials that we know. So it's really, really hard to break. And yet, because of its hexagonal structure, electrons can pass through it so quickly. So it's really incredible electrical conductor as well.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So because the electrons can move freely, you can pass a current through the layers.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's why it's really a really sensitive electrical conductor. It's transparent because it only absorbs 2.3% of visible light. It's flexible as well. And there's not many materials in the world that own all of those three properties, being transparent, flexible, and electrically conductive.
We wanted to cover this topic because graphene shows up a lot in news articles. It's always, they're putting graphene in this, they're putting graphene in that. It seems to be one of those things where I hadn't thought too much about what it actually is, but it crops up in like a really wide range of applications. And so, like you were saying, Clara, the reason for that must be because it has all these properties, or it's very good at a range of things. And so people are trying to find applications where those properties are useful.
People are throwing it in everything right now, to just see whether it can improve things, what effect it can have for the graphene and for the whole bunch of 2D materials that came to follow.
What I found appealing about graphene, and one of the reasons we chose to do an episode on this, is I felt that there's been a lot of talk in the media about this for coming on to 20 years now, and then not much actually coming out of it. So particularly coming from Manchester, it's graphene this, graphene that. But then it sort of felt like, okay, where is it now? What are the issues? And I understand that one of the main issues is mass production can be difficult, particularly for pure graphene. I suppose one of my biggest questions with graphene is, why so slow?
Yeah, so one part of me thinks, we need this kind of fuel to boost researchers and to boost scientists into being more engineering, kind of focusing on getting it out there. Another part of me thinks, give us a chance, like it's been 20 years since we've found out about what this material is, less than 20 years, 15 years. It takes a while to understand how to use this material for the best purpose, and also it is already out there in a lot of different ways that people don't yet know about. So graphene is in sort of millions of Ford cars at the moment to help with heat distribution within engines.
Oh, amazing.
And I don't know why they don't publish this more, but cars at the moment, they generate a lot of heat, and you can only make an engine as small as you can based on, you have to make it quite big so that you have enough air to kind of let the heat escape. But if you could have a foam-like aerogel graphene material which can conduct the heat away, then you can make the engine a lot smaller. And that's what they've done with some Ford cars.
Cool.
Is they've blended graphene in with different sort of foams so that you can utilize that heat conductive properties. But the applications that are coming out at the moment are all using this kind of chunky graphene, which is cheap to make, and you can sort of throw it in, and it's very, very dark in color. Like, it's not invisible to the eye, or just about visible. There's been a lot of hype around having this amazing step change, where computers are suddenly going to be 10,000 times faster than what they are.
Yeah.
Those headlines, they require research that we're just conducting now. So it's going to be a while until that stuff hits the market.
That's a really brilliant answer.
Oh, thank you.
And I think it ties into our purpose here at Have You Heard, is that sometimes the issue with sensationalized science is it then desensitizes the public to what's realistic. And when the original headlines started hitting the media about the amazingness of graphene, it gives the impression that this is all happening rather than hypothesized. And that step between happening and hypothesized is, a scientific career, and that does take time, and so it should do. But then also on the point that there are products out there that use graphene already, they're not hitting the major headlines because it's been sensationalized above that. The idea that then the public would be like, oh, okay, like, cool, but I thought it could do more than that.
It's something we've covered on here before. When you're talking about science in the news, you've got, a scientist be like, oh, I'm trying out this new thing. If all goes well, it could turn out to be useful for, making a smaller engine. And that
gets turned into scientists' sake. They can fit engine on head of pin.
because it's not as interesting for scientists to be like, oh, maybe possibly if this goes well and this goes, because things go wrong all the time in science, so you don't want to add all those caveats. But it means that it sounds like we're on the brink of something when really we're just trying out some stuff that might lead to it. And like you say, Clara, it's a very good point that approaching 20 years isn't a massive amount of time to be for researchers for a material that literally did not exist before that, and then trying out what it can do.
A classic pharmaceutical, just like a drug for cancer or whatever, takes 20 years from entering a pharmaceutical company to being a marketable product, and that's not even having to invent a whole new element, really.
Having said that as well, we need more engineers in the field of graphene. We have so many incredible scientists, and it's essentially an engineering problem. It's about scale up. It's about going from research into industry. So if anyone's listening and they're an engineer,
this is it. So scientists can show what it might be able to do and things like that. You need engineers to implement it, to make it happen, try it in applications and see how well it performs and things like that. But yes, this all might link nicely to the article that I've brought along to discuss today.
Excellent. Love a segue.
Discussing possibly slightly exaggerated claims about what graphene can do. My article is titled 1 million times thinner than a human hair, medical miracle that could cure the blind.
It just sounds like, Jesus, he cured the blind. He let the lame walk.
Yeah, it's that your go-to miracle is curing the blind. But yeah, so this is an article that I found from the Daily Mail.
Yeah, let's find out if there's a shred of truth, an inkling of truth within this Daily Mail article.
It's a really interesting article. So it's kind of got that very eye-grabbing headline, but it's actually kind of covering a few different topics. So it's generally talking about like medical applications for graphene. So it kind of goes through them, it does a brief summary on what kind of graphene is, and then applications that are currently going on for putting graphene into the human body, which I find fascinating. That seems crazy. But yeah, so the main one they're talking about is basically, so people have one of the quite common causes of blindness, especially as people get older, is age-related macular degeneration. So basically the retina at the back of your eye accumulates damage, and this affects your ability to see. So the idea is they're using graphene to replace it, to effectively the bit of your eye that senses light. They're trying to replace that with graphene, which I think has a lot to do with the kind of electrical properties of graphene.
Yeah, because your retina is
Ye-
basically just a substance that transforms one kind of signal into another. It turns light into an electronic signal, which then sends that to your brain,
Mhm.
which then interprets that. So if graphene is a substance that's able to transfer light into an electric component, then that follows logically.
Exactly. It's so graphene sensors are because this applies to with the retinas, but it also applies to biosensors, which a lot of people are using to kind of detect tiny trace amounts of an element. Because graphene's very electrically conductive, it can measure these tiny signals very well without getting a large amount of noise. So
Cool.
this can be applied to within the retina because it can detect different impulses, as you said, transfer this to an electrical signal. But the key part here is, as well, is that it's transparent and it's flexible. So
Yeah.
that's why there's this kind of step change over. They mentioned that they use sort of silica chips, which just makes my retinas hurt
Yeah.
thinking about like a sort of solid, or a kind of like a transistor in
Yeah,
your.
they go into it, and like I was saying before, so silicon is another popular one because like carbon, it can make lots of bonds, so it's quite a flexible material with what you can do with it. But yes, they talk about kind of previously silicone was used, and it doesn't work as well. They mentioned that it's rigid and fragile and prone to cracking,
Mm,
which is not what I want going on in
Oh
my eyes. I
God,
don't want anything cracking
no.
in my in my
my
eyes.
my eyes just
Um,
got really dry at
yeah,
the word
yeah,
crack.
everyone's just gone a bit squirmy.
I had a read of this article, and you know what? It's okay. What it really
Mm,
is it's a list of medical applications of graphene. So it's basically just a list. Like here, it could be used as an artificial retina. It can be used to help cardiac cell growth, and it's been shown to do this in rats. It can be a tracker for sun exposure, all of these sort of really interesting things. And in terms of have you heard, it for the most part it tells you where the current research is, like, oh, it's been shown in rats or it's more of a concept, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's no links at all in this article to what's actually happening and where they currently are in these technologies. And it'll say like the University of Texas is doing this, but then give no more detail.
Yeah, it would be nice to. So I tried to have a look at what kind of paper
Mm.
it's based on, and I couldn't really find it. It would be nice to have a link to the research if people wanted to have a little bit more of a look. But yeah, like you say, I like that. So they say who's doing the research, like a team at University of Texas and things like that. And this one does say, so it kind of tries to predict when it might be available. So instead of saying they're working on curing blindness, they say they're hoping to have it implemented in 3 to 5 years, which is a much more realistic way of looking at these things.
Yes,
Yeah, it's great.
this I loved from this article. That was one of my main ticks for this article. That's brilliant because it puts it into a real world understanding of, okay, well, if it's in rats now, it will take 5 years to get into humans or whatever, which is brilliant.
even to have it work in an animal is a big win.
Yeah.
But we also do need to properly research into even more about the potential toxicity of graphene within the body. So that needs to be completed.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to
Yeah,
ask about that kind of thing, like how safe it is in the human body. Is that something that's ongoing?
especially because going back
Mm.
to what we were saying, how it has that one unbound electron that's able to bind to things, I suppose, because it's free.
Yeah, that's ongoing research. I think so. Certain studies have shown, depending on how you take it in. So if you're having a device that's implanted in the brain or somewhere like that, and it's staying there, then it's okay. Some people are looking into using graphene for drug delivery, in which case, if you swallow a pill, then graphene accumulates in the bladder, and then you just pee it out.
Mhm.
But if you have it intravenously, then I think depending on how you intake the graphene, it can accumulate in different places. That's what people need to find out at the moment. But there are different versions of graphene where you can oxidize it with hydroxyl groups, and then it makes it less harmful to the
Yeah,
body.
because
It's really
I
interesting.
was gonna say, so this is related to, so one of the properties of graphene that we haven't kind of covered is, so it's in this hexagonal kind of pattern like you would have, say, on a football. So each carbon attaches to 3 other carbons, and they make this nice hexagonal stable structure. But carbon can kind of make 4 different bonds. So it's got this spare bond that it can use. And so a lot of the applications of graphene involve like sticking something on there. So I can't remember what they use in this right now. I tried to track down the thing. I think it's like molybdenum disulfide or something. But because of this spare bit, you can like stick something on there and change the properties of the graphene. So that's another reason why it can be used in so many different things.
Yeah. So with biosensors, what you do is you'd have your graphene, and then because it has that spare electron, you stick on some sort of antigen, and then that antigen can then detect even a trace amount, even if it just gets 1 molecule, that molecule attaches onto the antigen, that then sends a signal down to the graphene. The graphene then transfers that signal into an electrical signal, which then alerts, okay, we've detected this, whatever this molecule is. So because we have that spare electron, we can put on different antigens and make really effective biosensors for that.
That is amazing, because it's this spare electron. It's not just causing all of the amazing electronic responses, it's also allowing it to be this almost blank canvas where you can add things to it to sense various different things, which really opens up the options massively. Even just looking at biosensors, that's major.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But coming back to the article, one of the things I really liked about it is that at the end it had a link to a TED talk about graphene. It had that, if you want to know more.
Yeah, it's a really nice article. It gives like an overview of everything. I think, you know, if it went into more detail on each thing, it would be nice to get them to get someone from outside of the groups to talk about it a bit. But yeah, it's quite a surface level.
I think I would give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, it's a nice article. I like it.
It could be improved with a less sensationalized headline, where it's basically like list of all medical opportunities within graphene, because that's what it is. Whereas the current headline, where it's like could cure the blind, suggests that this is really going to go into how that would happen, which it doesn't necessarily do.
And also there are so many different ways that people can be blind.
It's one specific form of visual impairment. Yeah, it's but yeah, this is the reason why not journalists. They know how to make it sexy.
They know what the people want.
Whereas I'm like pure unadulterated science. That's the real
that's
sexy.
why we're scientists. We want that. Clara, have you brought an article along for us to have a gander at?
Yeah, I have. So the article that I brought is sort of an accumulation. So it is, again, another Daily Mail article, and it's called A Step Towards an Invisibility Cloak. Graphene sheet with thermal camouflage can hide soldiers from infrared cameras.
Very nice. Straight in there with the invisibility cloak. Like that's the dream. That's what I want from my futuristic technology, invisibility.
Yeah, what I do like about mainstream journals is that they are application focused. They are like engineers in that respect, is that they telling you, why do you care about this? And that's what I think sometimes we lack from sort of scientific journals, is that we get so excited and bogged down with the technicalities and to try and prove about it that we kind of forget to say, oh, by the way, this is why you should care.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's why it can be really difficult to cover scientific concepts in the news, is you get attracted to we're going to build a rocket to go to Mars, away from we've attached this particular molecule to a graphene layer. It's often difficult to see why that's a step towards something and things like that. So yeah, they do a lot of work, again, to make what we do seem sexy.
I think also scientists are always like low-key aware of what could happen, like particularly within your field. You're like, if we make this next step, that can then lead to this and this and this. And so everyone's aware that it's, you know, a potential cancer option or could lead to you living on Mars, that we don't need the sensationalized of like the next step towards us living on Mars is like they've attached this thing to this. We're just like, oh, they've attached the thing.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. We did mention before that, you know, we're skeptical of the sensationalization that happens, and yet we are naturally very application focused. So it's like, how do you find the middle ground, you know, where you keep people excited but you don't kind of get people riled up for something that's decades away.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just say I loved this article. I thought they really hit a lot of the things that we praise about here at Have You Heard. So
Ooh, go on.
I might even give it a 10 out of 10.
Oh. I'd like to clarify, we've never done a scoring system before this episode. It's not like we have rankings.
I've just come out of a section of my PhD where I've just got a lot of quantitative data.
Yeah. So you're like, numbers, I want numbers.
Numbers, give me a graph.
Go on. What do you like about it then?
If I'm giving my Katie's greatest hits of this article, it says, the authors of this new study, so it says it's a new study, led by the University of Manchester. Okay, we know where it is, and then they name the person.
Nice. So you know who's doing that.
So that was like 3 big ticks in one sentence, pretty much. So I was like, I'm here for this. And then next is they've got videos of the technology in use that they've taken directly from the nano letters, which I really like, because it's basically a scientific figure that's made it all the way into the media. That barely ever happens.
Nice.
And it's just, for example, it's a picture of graphene and then a picture of a human hand, and then showing that it can act as an invisibility cloak in terms of thermal imaging for that, which is, I'm a visual person. I love to see it.
Yeah. So what I love about this as well is that I've used this in outreach. Like, I've taken this to science festivals. This thing that he's holding in his hand in this article, it's such a beautiful visual way to explain how graphene is doing something. And also the caption in the actual article itself is so cool. I don't know why they didn't just put it straight over, but it just has like, now you see me, now you don't. And
Nice.
goal is to produce a scientific paper where I can have a little bit of a playfulness in there. Like,
oh yeah, definitely.
So it's thermal imaging. So the hotter something is, the kind of redder it appears in an image. And it's basically showing that you can use a layer of graphene to mask the heat that comes off something. Yeah.
So not only can you make something appear cold, so to try and hide that there's actually something hot, so if you put it over your hand will appear bright red, but the graphene patch will appear sort of nice and blue. But they've also introduced a feedback loop where it can disguise itself to the surrounding atmosphere.
That's amazing. It knows what the heat is like around it.
Exactly. It doesn't just turn up like a kind of very dark patch, because that's a bit bait. You know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, obviously there's
you can see it's hiding something.
There's something that's trying to hide here.
But no. It has like a feedback loop where it just, kind of sees what's going on around and then changes its absorbance based on the heat of the surroundings, which is
very really cool.
It's awesome. Not only is it really cool technology, so it is thermo camouflage. That's not sensationalized in the headline at all. It's got quotes from the original author. It's got these amazing videos. It talks about how it senses that background and then relays that. So it gives us a bit of information about how it actually works. We've got direct quotes from the nano letters paper, and then it links to that original paper. So it's really easy to find that primary literature, so that if you are interested, you can look into it more. And then the final thing that I was like, I'm here for this article, is then it's got another example of thermal camouflage from a US lab which has used silicon. So it's sort of showing that there are ways, other ways other than graphene, that use this kind of technology to cause thermal camouflage. And I'm very happy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think I have anything to add, to be fair, on the invisibility cloak, except that when you hear invisibility cloak, you're thinking optical, aren't you?
You are thinking optical.
And then you hear it's infrared and you're like, oh, I can shock someone who's got an infrared camera.
Yeah. Although, I was going to say, if you're really terrified of snakes, like, problem solved. You're invisible to snakes.
That would be very useful in Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
Just stay still, Katie. We know for a fact that their vision is based on movement. That's just science.
That's just pure fluffy science. Is it time for my article?
It is. What did you bring us today, Katie?
My article is one from The Independent, which is entitled, "Clothes Lined with Graphene Could Prevent Mosquito Bites." And as someone that gets bitten by insects every time I go somewhere warm, I was very invested from the go with this article.
Yeah. Are you a target for
I'm a bit of a
mosquitoes?
target. Which means whenever I go to any sort of warm tropical climate, not only does my very pale, freckly skin burn, I also get itchy bites, and it's not the greatest time. Maybe I am meant to stay in
Uh,
Manchester.
there's like lots of science about what causes it, but like I'm never bothered by mosquitoes when I
There
go
is
away.
and which this article goes into, is there's a big part of
Ah,
chemosensing with mosquitoes, and it's sort of what um, volatiles you're releasing can indicate whether you're tastier,
so
yeah,
like about your
to a
sweat and
mosquito.
stuff. Yeah.
So basically,
Mm.
this article goes into how having basically a thin sheet of graphene covering your skin, so like a glove, t-shirt, or a long sleeve t-shirt, can actually completely stop mosquitoes from being able to bite you. And there's 2 points. It can act as a physical barrier. So when they first did this, they were like, okay, this thin sheet covering you, it's not too heavy. Will it stop the mosquitoes from physically being able to contact your skin? And it does. It stops the fascicle, which is the pokey bit of the mosquito, being able to physically, yes,
The stinger
being able to
beak
physically
thing.
penetrate
Yeah.
through to your skin. So you get no bites when you wear it.
Nice.
But something that they were surprised by when they did this was the mosquitoes weren't even landing on the graphene glove. And then with a little bit more scientific investigation, they concluded that the graphene layer prevents the chemo signals from transferring from your hand to the mosquito. So, for example, you
Oh.
Now
get,
that is
you're
really
running about,
cool.
it's hot, you're getting sweaty. If you've got graphene over you, that sweaty smell doesn't penetrate through the graphene, and therefore the mosquito doesn't know you're there. It's basically an invisibility cloak for mosquitoes.
For mosquitoes. So we're invisible to
Yeah.
snakes, we're invisible to mosquitoes. We're
We're
getting
getting there.
real
We're getting
close.
there. And that's isn't that amazing?
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think all we need is spiders. All we need is spiders, and we've got the Holy Trinity.
And it wasn't even something that these researchers intended. They were like, okay, it's a physical barrier. And then it was this chemical thing that really excited them and excited me as well. So with this article, they went into the details of the study. So they said what they did is they put a human arm into an enclosure of mosquitoes, and they either had bare skin, they had a cheesecloth over the top, or they had this graphene thing.
Oh, that's some nice, again,
Low tech
low
science.
tech science right there. Just I'm gonna stick
And
my
then it's
arm in this
how many
thing, see
bites
what
do I have?
happens. Yeah.
And
My God.
oh,
Like it's still, even if you're covered in graphene, it's still quite a cool.
just
Go on then.
Is that
Let's see what happens.
the PhD student's first
that's
day?
no, that's
Oh,
100% the undergrads.
yeah,
Yeah, just stick your hand in there. Yeah, it'll
Oh,
be fine.
Go get bit. Go get bit.
And the article's got direct quotes from the main author, which is brilliant. It's linked to the original paper, and they showed when this was published. So it was published in 2019. All really interesting data, and they didn't over sensationalize it. They would just state facts that were pretty much taken from the paper. The mosquitoes didn't even land on you if you had the graphene on you. It was just sort of thrown in there. No like excessive exclamation points, and I was just there like, this is so dope, this is awesome.
It's cool enough. You know what I mean? When the science speaks for itself, it's cool enough. You don't need to dress it up.
Yeah, so I went to the actual paper to look at this because I was just so interested. So this graphene oxide membrane is basically a molecular barrier. So they've shown in the physical form that it doesn't let any molecules pass up, even down to helium atoms. So then that makes sense. It's not going to let your big, bulky, sweaty, smelly molecules pass, and therefore you're invisible.
It's a bit personal, Katie. I try not to take that personally.
She was looking at you.
And then they even provided some information on what control they used to conclude this, which I thought was great because I love a good control. So what they did is they did it again. They stuck the hand in with the graphene sheet, but this time they took some of their sweat and wiped it on the top of the graphene. So you've got human hand, graphene sheet, sweat layer.
To show that it's blocking it.
And the mosquitoes swarmed to it then
Oh,
and landed on it. But then they couldn't actually bite you because of the physical penetration. So it showed that it was a chemical blocking system that was going on there, which is awesome.
that's really cool. So is it like a normal fabric that has a layer of graphene in it?
Yeah, it's got it is, for example, a glove that has a lining of graphene in it.
Okay, so they've just added a graphene
Yeah,
layer to
I think
that's
so.
cool.
Could be really doable. So can you imagine having that on sleeping bags and things like that, or or even just mosquito nets, so that they're not just blocked from getting through, but they're just like, oh, well,
They
okay,
don't even know you're there.
Yeah.
nothing's there for me to get.
And
Yeah, I think just briefly important to point out, like, the reason this is so important is that mosquitoes are vectors for, like, mosquitoes
many
kill
diseases.
so many people through.
Yeah.
They'll bite one person exposed to their blood, go to another person. Like they expose a lot of people.
They are massive vectors for disease spreading.
And so much human misery. The idea that we could make ourselves invisible to mosquitoes is incredible.
It's revolutionary.
And I should mention as well that it's graphene oxide, so therefore it's a cheap version of graphene, which means that we could be developing.
Oh, is that one of the ones you can easily make? Lots
Even
of?
better.
It's not. You don't need the perfect version of graphene. You can. This is a easy, already mass-produced material.
Yeah, it's very cool stuff. They've got a quote from the people directly involved,
Yeah.
kind of saying what they want to get out of it and what it can do. It's a nice article. I like it.
And even the media article alludes to a potential problem. So they mentioned that once you wet this graphene oxide substance, it becomes a different material, a different surface that's then no longer a physical barrier to the mosquitoes. So that chemical barrier is still in place, but that physical barrier is no longer there. So the mosquitoes therefore won't be able to see you, but they could accidentally bump into you and bite you.
So that's important to consider, because a lot of tropical areas are very humid. I have no idea what humidity these experiments were conducted at. So they need to look at that. Maybe looking at some different coatings.
Exactly, and that this even the media article highlights that there's ongoing work and to stabilize these to enable them to work in more humidity, which you really rarely hear in media articles of what is the future steps, what is currently ongoing. So I really enjoyed that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, nice. Just what I wanted.
Yeah. Very impressed. Though I still think the second article is my winner of today.
For me, that it's the mosquito bite one. Also that it's kind of related to my field, and how hideously subjective we all get. PhD.
Mention graphene oxide. I'm there.
That's all it takes. Just a whisper of graphene oxide. Graphene can work as a infrared invisibility cloak, not optical.
Yeah, graphene really can stop you getting bitten by mosquitoes, but you wouldn't necessarily want it if you just come out of the pool.
Graphene can do a lot of things, but maybe it's not quite ready to cure all blindness. Thank you very much for listening. We will catch you next time.
Have You Heard have a number of projects exploring science in the news. For more information, visit haveyouhearduk.com. If you have any comments or questions, or a headline you'd like us to tackle, get in touch with us on Facebook or Twitter at haveyouhearduk, or email us at haveyouhearduk@gmail.com.
You can just say it. I can cut it out.
It's your line.
That big thing in red.
Oh yeah, that one.